As a species, we're great believers. It's almost as if we were born to believe. It's almost as if scepticism is a real effort for us.
I think human history says to us that people need to believe. They need a story that helps to understand what's going on, even if they don't believe the story as literal fact. They like an allegory or a metaphor or some kind of picture, some kind of narrative that they can place themselves in. That's the genius of some political leaders, that they give us a narrative in which we can place ourselves. And it's the genius of religious stories, myths, legends, other big kind of overarching narratives that where people say, well, it's not telling us how the world began in a scientific sense, but it's giving us a way of thinking about how we could make sense of life, how we could add meaning to our own lives. So the argument against religion that it's irrational and that it should be replaced by a scientific discourse is kind of irrelevant.
So we seem as a species to be believers, and yet one of the most common propositions that I've encountered, particularly in the last 15 years or so in my social research program, is a common cry, I should say, among contemporary Australians is, if only I believed in something.
One of the characteristics of Australians is that they are disposed to believe in something they call God. About 75% of Australians would describe themselves as believing in God. Now, you'd have to drill down to find out what they mean by God and what they mean by believe, because about 30% of Australians claim to believe in astrology, and what exactly they mean by that, I'm not sure either. But there's quite, compared with many other countries around the world, there's quite a high level of declared belief in God, which rather oddly coexists in Australia with a very low level of religious practice. Only about 15% of Australians attend church regularly, while this very large majority claim to believe in God. So there's a disconnect there, which has to do, I think, with people in Australia being a bit embarrassed about the subject of God and religion and belief, feeling it's a very private domain and a bit awkward about it coming into the public domain. There's also a very sharp distinction, I think, in Australians' minds, in many people's, not just Australians' minds, between private religious faith and institutional religion.
We know why people want to believe in something that we might call religious and they might call spiritual. It's because we are all confronted by the mystery of existence.
I don't think, for example, people involved in what is now called progressive religious thought are guilty of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I think they're doing what revolutionaries always have to do, and that is step outside the institution, look at it as far as possible with clear, fresh eyes, and see what the core message might have to offer to the contemporary world in a way that kind of bypass. I mean, the Don Cupid Sea of Faith movement, the Catalyst for Renewal movement within the Catholic Church, other movements, the Centre for Progressive Religious Thought, other movements do seem to me to be on the right track in the sense they're saying, look, we don't want to abandon the idea that there's some kind of religious story that can satisfy the spiritual quest in most people, but we are a bit inclined to abandon the conventional story. Now, of course, this leads to trouble. It leads to trouble when such people say we want to renew the organisation from within. Well, it is the nature of organisations that they don't wish to be renewed from within or from without.
Where there is religious growth at the moment, it tends to be at the fundamentalist end of the spectrum. Because when people are feeling so destabilised, feeling so anxious, what they're looking for often is a complete system. Some black and white simple certainty.
Another challenge they have, of course, is that in parts of the institutional church, and again, not just the church, but the mosque and the synagogue, there are plenty of people who want things to remain exactly as they are, who are not remotely interested in liberals talking about moving forward or cutting-edge theology or being more sensitive to the needs of a contemporary world. They don't want to hear any of that. They feel they have cracked the code, and the code is immutable. The code is there now, the form it's in we must accept as being literally the only form it could be in. And of course I'm talking here particularly about fundamentalism.
Atheism is back in fashion, we all know that. And so often we talk as though there is an unbridgeable gulf between the atheist and the theist, and I must say I'm not sure there is. But
we all want a better world, a safer world, a more loving, just, fair kind of world. We all want the disadvantaged, the dispossessed, the marginalised, etc. to be cared for. I think there is a bridge between atheism and theism that could easily be crossed in the name of love. I mean, on both sides we see love as a transforming emotion, a transforming spirit in the individual, in a community, in the world at large.